Okay, so now's probably a good time to introduce a bit about BoxCutter before we start hopping into operations and things like that, where I'm probably going to be using quite a bit of BoxCutter. So let's go ahead and hop right into that. So BoxCutter is super easy to get used to. There's really not too much to discuss. So first thing you're going to notice, if you press Alt-W, this will disable and this will also enable BoxCutter, Alt-W. By default it should be turned on once you install it though, but if for some reason when you press the D key nothing comes up, then just press Alt-W and it should work. And yeah, like I said, the D key is going to bring up the BoxCutter menu. It's super easy to get used to. So we have three different types of cutters. We have the BoxCutter, which is enabled by default. All you do is you click, drag, and release and pull down or up. And if you want to lock it in, you can press the enter key or just spam click a few times, which is what I do, and super easy. You can also, whenever you add in a cut, so once again click, drag, and release, you can also press the tab key to lock it into the current position and have a bit more manual control using these little orbs right here, as you can see. Now the corner one will allow you to adjust it on all axes basically. And this little blue one will represent the bevel, so if you increase this, this will add a nice little bevel onto the mesh here, and then we can just, press the enter key to lock that in. I don't really go to the live cutter too much with the tab key. Sometimes it's helpful just to kind of pivot around, but usually I don't do that. And also to cancel this operation, you can press right click, and if that doesn't work for you, you might have to go up here to behavior and turn on. There should be an option for right mouse button to cancel it. Maybe it's under input. Yeah, input. Right mouse button, cancel Ngon. I guess this is for when we work with Ngons. But yeah, either way, you can press the escape key, or you can simply right click and cancel it that way. Generally, I'm pressing the escape key just because it feels more intuitive to me. Ngon's a bit different, so maybe there was a separate menu for that specific reason, which we'll discuss. Okay, so next one I want to cover is whenever we click and drag, there's a whole host of different operations we can do. If you look at the bottom of the screen, kind of where my cursor is, you're going to see a bunch of different operations. The first one is the H key, which will give you a nice wire outline if you don't like the entire red. I personally don't like this that much. It's kind of hard to see, so I definitely would keep that on if you want to see the entire cut. So before we go through the different boolean operations, I'll discuss a few different things. Whenever you're cutting, you can press the G key to grab it and move it around. Generally, I don't do this though because I don't like the control. I just like having it in one spot, and if I decide I don't like it, I just redo the cut. That's just me personally. You can also press R to rotate, and it's going to be snapping the rotation by default. You can also press the S key to scale. In general, I never use these three commands because I always like to have complete control over where the cut is by default. But those options are available to you if you ever want to use them. Okay, and I think I already mentioned it, but to bevel you just press the B key, and that's going to allow you to add in a bevel quickly, or you can of course do that from the live operation here when you press tab and adjust it that way. You can also scroll up to increase the amount of segments, so scroll up like that. Same if you're just pressing the B key instead, you can scroll up or scroll down to increase or decrease the segment. It's all very intuitive. Now we need to discuss the boolean operations. So most of you are probably familiar with both of these if you've done any sort of hard surface before, but we'll definitely discuss them. So the first one is the default one, which is a simple difference boolean. You're going to see if we add this in and cut something, we actually have a boolean in the modifier stack set to difference. Very simple. Now that's the default one, but if you press the D key, you can actually go up here to this top left menu, and there's a bunch of different boolean operations in here that you can use. So the second one in here is the slice operation. Most of you are familiar with this. If you just cut in, basically adds in a slice and separates these two objects. Very simple. Let's go ahead and undo that. The next one we have is our intersect, which I bet you like no one uses. I don't use it. I don't know if you do, but if you ever need to use the intersect boolean, it's there for you. You can just click and drag, and there you go, intersect boolean. The next one we have in here is the inset boolean. I use this one a lot because it's really cool. So if I click and drag, you're going to see this adds an inset boolean to it. Now by default the inset's probably too small, so if you want to adjust that, all you have to do is press the T key to bring it in or bring it out. You can also do the same operations. You can press the B key to bevel, grab it, move it. All the operations remain the same. Inset booleans are just really cool to use. The next one we have in here is the, join, so union boolean. And basically what this does is it allows you to join two meshes together, as you can see. In the last one, let me see what the last one is. I don't ever go in this menu, and you'll see why in a second. These aren't boolean operations here, but this one is basically a knife cutter. So you could go in here and simply use a knife cut manually with the K key. Kind of slow to use though. Instead, what you can do is simply use the box cutter, click and drag, and you're going to see that adds in a knife cut that way. Pretty useful. And what else do we have in here? Oh, by the way, whenever I use the knife cutter, I usually press the Alt V key and turn on wireframe so that way I can actually see the cut. Just something I prefer to do. Let me undo that. Okay, and the last one we have here, well, this is one that I will mention, is extract. This is for custom cutters. I never really use this, but we'll discuss it briefly in a second. The last one is a simple make command. All this does is it allows you to create a brand new separate object in your scene. If I just click and drag, you're going to see we just have a brand new object. So very simple. So I'm going to discuss a bit about custom cutters real quick. Like I said, I don't personally use these, but it might be useful to some of you, so I'm going to discuss it. So say I came in here with a simple difference cutter, right, and just made a few cool designs in here. Maybe this, and this. Maybe do a few more in here just for good measure. Okay, this is probably enough. So say I wanted this exact cut in multiple different positions. I wanted to reuse this cut. So what you can actually do is press the D key and go here to this extract option, and all you have to do is click and drag over the set that you want to use as a custom cutter, and then basically just pull this down. And now you're going to see if I press the D key and go over to the custom cutter menu, now if I drag in a brand new set, you're going to see we have a brand new and custom cutter. So this can be useful for all sorts of things, but in general I don't really use this option. Okay, let me go ahead and add in a brand new cube so that way we have all these booleans removed. Okay, so now that you know all the different boolean operations rather, I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can do this a bit quicker than having to go into this menu each time. So if I'm running a difference boolean, and let me get out of this custom one, if I'm running a simple difference boolean and I want to swap to a slice operation, all you have to do is look here on the bottom panel for the boolean operation you want. In this case, the X key is the slice operation, so I'm just going to press the X key, and that's a quick way to get a slice. If you want an inset boolean, you can just press the I key to make an inset, and then the T key to adjust it. Very simple there. If you want to use a knife cut, well, usually what I do is I just go up here to the top left. There's a quick little button to press because the knife cut is a pretty frequently used one, so you can turn it off and on there. Pretty simple. But you can also press the K key if you want to swap into knife and do it that way. But yeah, that's how you can do that. And you can also press the J key for a simple union boolean. Only issue, when you press the J key, you have to make sure you press the E key as well to extrude, a bit different than if you did it manually. So just make sure when you press the J key, you also press the E key to extrude it up. And the last one we need to discuss is the make option. You just press the A key and then press E to extrude, and that is how you can quickly use the make tool. Like I said, everything is listed on the bottom here, so you don't have to necessarily rewatch this video. You just have to know where to find these options, and you can go in here and find all sorts of things. One final thing I did forget to mention is you can actually array your cutters. So if you cut and press the V key, you can actually array. You can also press the X key to adjust the axis, which is pretty cool. And you can scroll up to increase the amount of cuts. Sometimes I also like to get a bit fancy and use the solidify option right off the bat. So if you press the T key, this will actually make a solidification on your cutter object, so that way you have a pretty cool design like that. So that about covers everything in terms of adding in cuts and how they work. It's pretty straightforward, and everything you need to know is listed on the bottom. And the more you use BoxCutter, the less you'll have to refer to these, just because it'll kind of become muscle memory. So those are the boolean operations. This is how you use cuts. I also want to discuss the circle cutter and the N-gon cutter, both very powerful tools. So let's discuss circle tool and the N-gon tool. So the circle one is pretty self-explanatory. It simply adds in a circular cutter. So all you have to do is the same thing as before. You can click and drag, you can adjust all the different boolean operations, you can do literally all the same stuff that we did with the regular box cutter here. Only difference is this one is literally just a circle. Now there is a menu I would suggest taking a look at. If you press Ctrl D, we actually have a menu here based on the cutter we're using. So right now this one's based off a circle because we're using a circle, but if you're using box you're going to have a different menu here as well. Let's just focus on the circle tool for now. So you can quickly adjust the vertex count of your circles, and generally I use something like 64 or higher because 32 is just a bit too blocky for me. If we cut this in, you can kind of see, we can see the physical edges of that cylinder, which I don't like. Usually 64 is more than enough for what I need to do, and it makes it look nice and smooth. In terms of settings, those are the only two real differences between the circle tool and the box tool, meaning that with circle you can simply adjust the vertex count. Everything else is basically the same. Now if you press Ctrl D, there is a menu here for the rotation snap and the taper. So I don't really mess with these too much. I think the snap angle is good by default, but if you're rotating the cutter and you want the snap angle to, you know, maybe go 90 degrees, let's go ahead and take a look. If this is set to 90 degrees and I cut and press R to rotate, it's literally going to, it's kind of hard to see, isn't it? Maybe I should use a circle. So when I cut this in and press R, this is literally going to rotate. I think it's rotating along the long axis. So I'm going to press the X key to change the axis of rotation. And as you can see, it's snapping in 90-degree increments to rotate, and you can choose really any axis you want to rotate around, you know, Z, X, Y, whatever you want. So that's what this Ctrl D snap angle does. Generally 15 degrees is more than enough, simply because I like to have a lot more control so I can rotate in smaller increments. So unless you have a specific need to adjust the snap angle, then I would probably just leave it at 15. You're not going to really find many circumstances in which you need a higher amount. So taper is an interesting one, so let's go ahead and discuss that. So this is actually a fairly new functionality as I record this video. I think maybe just a few weeks old. So taper, I don't really use it too much so far, but it's definitely something I can see myself using. So if I were to click and drag with the regular box cutter, right, and cut down, maybe it's easier to demonstrate over here. So if I cut down and press the Shift T key, this will add a taper in, and as you can see, basically this just scales the bottom face up or down, so pretty useful stuff. That's simply all this taper option does, is it adjusts the taper amount. So if I put this to like, I don't know, 0.1 and you know, try to taper, Shift T, actually I think it resets, so I guess if you just, I haven't really used this menu too much, but I guess it'll kind of make the taper shorter depending on what this amount is. To be completely honest, I don't see any practical use of actually using that. I'd rather just press Shift T and do it manually so that way I have more control. But that menu is there. It's fairly new, like I said, so maybe you'll find some use for it. So let's continue on and discuss some of the other settings we have in here. So if we press Ctrl D, there are other settings. I'm not going to go over them in this panel just because I feel like they're kind of clustered and confusing. Instead, I'm going to discuss the same exact settings that can be found by just pressing the D key up here. So the first setting we have are the snapping tools right here. So if we turn both of these on, this will basically allow us to snap in a grid-like pattern. So if I hold Control, you're going to see we have this grid that pops up and basically allows us to have a lot more fluent and precise control over where these cuts are. So if I hold Control and kind of snap around, you can see everything is perfectly even, and then all I have to do is, you know, release, and then I can cut through, bevel, do whatever I want really. So that's the snap tool. Now in the snap tool you can also adjust the size of the grid. So maybe if I put this to like 0.1, you're going to notice the grid is a lot smaller, so you have a lot more control over that as well. Generally I keep mine around 0.1 just so that way I have as much room to snap as I want. There's some other settings in here. You can snap vertices, you can snap edges, you can snap around to faces. Basically, the vertex one is pretty obvious. You can start at a vertex. The other one here, the edge one, basically puts a dot in the middle of each edge, and the face one puts a dot in the middle of each face. So if I were to turn all these off, you're going to see if I hold control, none of those options are there in the corners, but I don't see any real reason to turn these off, so I would just leave them on, to be honest, so that way you have a lot more control over where you're snapping. Jerry's just the type of guy, at least from what I've got from him, to add in stuff that, you know, not many people necessarily use, but at least it's there, and that's kind of why I like this add-on, is because not only are you getting functionality, you're also getting potential adjustments should you need them, even though you probably won't end up using them. That's why I love his work ethic, because he puts in stuff that, you know, he doesn't really need to put in necessarily. So yeah, that's basically the idea behind the snapping. It's pretty obvious, so I'm not going to really discuss anything else in here. I mean, you can adjust the rotate angle as well with your snapping. I wouldn't really bother with that. It's basically the same angle we have on the Control D menu that we showed before. It's just up here as well. Like I said, I keep mine on 15 degrees because that seems to be more than enough for me. Now before we head on to the end-gone cutter, this one's kind of more complex than the others. I do want to mention the line box tool. So say I'm going to this cube here, let me actually remove the modifier. Say I'm going to this cube here and, I don't know, I rotate this cube. Like, actually this is probably a bad way to explain it. Maybe I'll go in here and bevel this vertex with Control-Shift-B. So now if I cut in here, you're going to see it doesn't necessarily align like we want it to. Now there is a way to adjust that aligning. I'll discuss that as well. But one easy way to quickly get that effect is to go to the line box tool here, and then you can actually cut in any direction you want and still get the same exact box effect that we have with the box cutter tool. So line box basically just gives you more control over how these lines are positioned. As you can see, we can move basically anywhere, whereas without the line box, we don't really have much control over how this is positioned. One other thing you can do with line box is if you cut in here, maybe a straight line, by default it's just going to cut through like normal, but if we press the W key, this will allow us to cut in a wedge, which is pretty cool depending on the design you're going for. So you just press the W key to turn on wedge or turn it off. Pretty simple stuff. So one final thing I want to mention is the ability to actually cut based off of an edge. I don't even know how to explain it, so I'm just going to show you. So if we go in here and maybe we have this area beveled, right? So this is where it gets kind of tricky, because what if we come in here with a box cutter? You know, easy enough, working exactly as intended. You know, I can go to this edge, it's working as intended, but what if I want to cut along this edge right here? Well, look at the issue. It's only in one static direction. It's not going to cut according to the same angle as this edge right here. So of course you could go in here and then recall the cutter, which we haven't discussed yet with hard ops, so just bear with me, and try to rotate it manually, right? But that's tedious, and imagine this thing wasn't perfectly 45 degrees, then it's going to be even harder. What we can actually do is press the Shift V key to get into this menu here for view and change over from local to nearest edge, and if we try to cut in now, you're going to see that cuts in, and sometimes the nearest edge option might not work, so you can go over to longest edge and it'll do kind of the same thing. Usually I just switch between the two until one of them works. Like in this case, that one doesn't work, so I'd probably go back to nearest edge, and there we go. So that's a pretty cool tool as well. Now there's a few different settings that I don't really utilize too much, but I think are worth mentioning. So one of them is this little icon right here. You probably will see it and just won't have any clue what it does. Basically, if you selected this one, you can hover over it and read what it says. But what this does, if I cut with the box cutter, right? By default, when I release, it allows me to adjust the extrusion. But if I turn this on, it'll automatically just release it and put it right in this position, so I have a bit more manual control. But this also means you have to add an additional step of dragging these orbs down or up, and I just don't find that to be very practical, so I usually keep this off. But in the case you want to have this automatically go live, you can just turn that one on. Another important one is this non-destructive and destructive menu. So let's say we add in a cut. We'll go in here, and of course that's still turned on, but yeah, we go in here, so we add a cut. But I don't want this to be non-destructive, right? I want the boolean to apply right off the bat. Well, what we can do is simply change over to destructive, and now when we cut in, no boolean, it gets applied right off the bat. Most of you probably don't want to work like this, so in general you can just stay non-destructive, but in the case you ever want to work destructively, you can simply turn that on. Once again, I don't like that setting because if I'm going to go destructive or want to work destructively, I'd much rather just go into edit mode, and you can actually use BoxCutter in edit mode. If you press Alt W to turn it on, you can literally do the same stuff and it's going to work destructively that way. So for that reason, I never change this to destructive, but the option is there. Another quick thing I want to mention is this little tool right here. We haven't discussed the alignment tools yet, so I'm going to add in a sphere for this specific example. So maybe just a UV sphere is fine. Subdivide that a few times, smooth it out. So say I want to go in here and I want to cut half of this out, right? So what I could do is simply use BoxCutter, but you're going to notice if I click and drag, by default it's going to snap to the point we clicked on, and it's not going to be completely uniform. See that? It's kind of going at an angle based off of the vertex that we started on. This will kind of be more enhanced. See how skewed that cut is? So if we don't want it to cut based off of the normal direction of the area we're selecting, all we need to do is go up here and turn on this option, and that'll be view align. So now if I click on it, it'll cut straight from our view independent of which area we're selecting. So now you can see I can just cut straight through. Pretty easy stuff, and that's a pretty useful tool as well. So there are a few different settings in here for alignment based off of the world and cursor settings. I never use these though because they're really fiddly. If I cut based off of the view of the cursor, I really never know where this thing is going to cut in. It's just really wonky and weird to me. I never use that one. You can do the same thing for world, but to be honest with you, I don't find these to be useful at all. I prefer to just use object or view. Very simple. And just a quick way to go in and out of the view or object aligns is simply click this, but you can also access it here in the D panel. So yeah, that's about it for the more important tools that you might find yourself using. I don't think there's too much left to discuss except the N-gon cutter here. Alright, so this should be the last video discussing BoxCutter. I want to talk a bit about the N-gon cutter, which is one of my favorites. You can do all sorts of things with it. A little bit wonky to get used to, so there's a few things I wanted to discuss. So first one, I'm going to hop into side view into ortho, so 1 on the numpad, then 5 on the numpad. And basically if you go into your N-gon cutter, which I'm in right now, and you just start cutting, this basically allows you to cut in as many different segments and designs as you want. And as you may have guessed, we're going to get this type of cut going on, right? Now obviously you want it to look a bit more aesthetically pleasing, so usually what I do is I hold control while I drag to snap it in increments and to keep it completely straight. So generally you're going to want to do that whenever you add in an N-gon cutter, so that way you can actually cut in cool designs that look accurate, right? So that way when you cut it in, it's actually at a decent angle for each cut. Now one thing I like to do, because I personally enjoy doing a lot of sci-fi, is I like to come in here and instead of doing a boring straight cut like this, which basically anyone can do, I like to go in at like different angles, kind of like this, so that way it kind of has some variation to it. It has more of a aesthetically pleasing sci-fi type of look. So if I ever cut in here, usually instead of going straight down, I'll just kind of cut in at an angle. And in my opinion, it just looks a bit nicer. Now sometimes you'll have issues like this where you don't want to cut anymore, but it's kind of stuck. Just press the tab key as usual, and then you can go ahead and cut through. And in my opinion, this looks a lot cooler than if we had completely straight lines going on it. Now if you run a bevel on N-gon cutters, this thing can get pretty wonky. So if you try to go in here and maybe cut in something, you might think, okay, I'm ready to run a bevel. And if you want to run a bevel on an N-gon cut, it's actually going to remove the last section you added in. So if I press the B key, like the one that we're moving around now is just going to stop. So if I press B, now we're going to have an issue where the bevel will work, but it's not going to actually cut through that corner. So I'm not really a big fan of this functionality, but basically whenever you want to run a bevel on an N-gon cutter, make sure you do an additional cut. Even if you don't need it right here, just cut, kind of let this thing hang. You can press the B key to bevel, And there you go. That's one little thing a lot of people will probably run into, so I just wanted to make sure I pointed it out. One other thing with the end-gone cut is that you can unselect this option right here for cyclic, and if you turn that off, it's actually going to add in an end-gone cut, which is solidified, which is really cool, because now I can get cool designs like this that kind of go through. I can press the T key to adjust the width of it, to adjust the thickness rather, and you can get all sorts of cool designs like that. So sometimes you might want to turn that option off to get this cool type of non-cyclic type of cut going on. Super fun to use in my opinion. One of the most practical ways I use this type of end-gone cut, if I start a new scene in here, sometimes what I'll do is I'll have like a generic cut in the top, and I'm just going to press Q, go to mod scroll, which we'll discuss shortly in one of the next videos. But basically, I use this setting a lot. If I want to get like a structural type of design, like a truss going on, you can actually go in here to the end-gone cut and cut the cutter itself. So we'll turn this off, and then you can actually get in here and cut the cutter and get cool types of effects just like this. Super cool. But of course, you could just as easily keep this turned on and run a regular cut like this, right? And then just press the T key that way. Just a bit more clicking involved doing it this way, so I mean, you can do it whichever way you want. And yeah, that's about it for the end-gone cut, I think. I don't think there's too much left to discuss with it, so we'll continue on. Now, sometimes when you run some cuts on your object, you'll have a lot of booleans, in which case you might want to quickly apply them. Now, up here you're going to see an option next to non-destructive, which is called smart apply. We haven't discussed smart apply yet. This is a hard ops function, but in BoxCutter, you can actually, this is technically, no, I guess it's technically part of BoxCutter. So basically what you do is you click this button and it will apply all the booleans at once. And best thing about it is if you have a bevel here, smart apply will not apply your bevel. If you click this, it'll only apply the booleans, so that way your bevel is still live here in the stack. So that's a quick and easy way to apply your cutters, but you'll find that pressing Q and going to smart apply this way is a lot quicker, which we'll be discussing later on in the hard ops section. So that is pretty much everything you need to know about BoxCutter. Once again, the D key allows you to cycle between the different cutters, change some of the settings in here, most of which you can change by simply just pressing one of the hotkeys. You also have this menu over here, which is the start operation. You can change this to really whatever you want. By default, the start operation is set to nothing, but if you wanted to, maybe you wanted the start operation to have an array, so it would actually, you know, start with an array, or you could start it with, I don't know, a solidify. I never use this, but it can be useful to some people, and that's about the last thing I needed to mention really. If you ever need to adjust some specific settings or to see the general functionality of BoxCutter, you can actually go up here to this menu and take a look at some of the different settings here, like behavior, shape, all sorts of different things. I don't touch too many of these. In general, I turn on right mouse button to cancel end-gone. I don't think I turn on anything else though. Yeah, that's pretty much about it. There are all sorts of settings in here you can go through, but most of the defaults will suit you just fine. So that's about it for the BoxCutter section. It wasn't really super long to discuss. Hard ops is definitely the most hefty one, so I thought it was a good time to introduce it now. So now we can continue on with the hard ops stuff.